Didn't expect to have Zak Keefer on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line back so quickly, but here we are, Zach. Here we are. How are you, sir?
Well, to be completely honest, I'm exhausted.
Does that mean you turned down the job to coach the team? Is that what you're talking about? You just went through that exhaustive process yourself?
I was listening to your conversation a minute ago, and you were knocking Jeff Saturday's qualifications. What you didn't mention was that he was 20-16 as a high school coach. That's 4 games above 500. And I believe he led the school to their first playoff win. So let's not just omit the facts here.
Well, I mean, I have to push back with your characterization of me knocking it. I was just actually delivering the fact that he has experience at the high school level, which is not something I need to point out as a fact ever when I'm talking about the hiring of an NFL head coach. So let's jump right into it. How did this come about, Zach, best on your knowledge?
This has got Jim Irsay written all over it. I mean, like you said, Rich, and I was kidding, by the way. Like you said, this is unprecedented territory. This hasn't happened where you've hired an interim coach at this level that hasn't coached in college and hasn't coached in the NFL in 6 decades. That's how long this has been. And this has gotten Jim Irsay written all over it because this is the 3rd straight move that he has ordered from the top. And you go back to the first one, it was Carson Wentz last year. They're getting him out no matter what. The second one we talked about a couple of weeks ago on your show, and that was to bench Matt Ryan against, I think, my opinion, against Frank Reich's wishes, who was the coach at that time, and against the wishes of the team. Like, they always talk about the locker room. Chris Ballard, the GM, always says the locker room knows. Well, the locker room knew that you were benching Matt Ryan, and I'm not omitting his struggles. He turned the ball over, he fumbled, but they're a better team and they're a better offense with Matt Ryan versus Sam Ehlinger. And then to finish my point, the third move is not just to fire Frank Reich, it's to go hire a coach who, and I think both things are true. Jeff Saturday's an awesome guy. He's an awesome dude. He is a heck of a football player. He's also very unqualified for this position, and that's the third gamble that Jim Irsay is making. And it just feels like this team is falling further and further into disarray and dysfunction.
So why does anybody know why Irsay turned to Jeff Saturday? Why is there any reporting at all on this here?
Because he likes him. Like, that's the only tangible answer we got in a very wild 35-minute press conference last night. And just to paint a picture for those who didn't watch, like, I got a text from someone who used to work in the building as a coach who called it embarrassing. I mean, we had a mention of a rocket ship going to Mars. We had a mention of Michael Jordan and the missed shots he made in his career. We had a CIA mention. And we had Al Davis quotes. I mean, it was just a winding, circuitous, random press conference that really didn't give us an answer to your question, why Jeff Saturday. They loved him as a player. They love him as a man. But, Rich, this guy literally flew in yesterday to Indianapolis and had to meet his coaching staff because there's guys on his coaching staff he's never met. They play a game in 5 days, and he doesn't know who's calling the plays for it.
I honestly, I don't even know what the follow-up question is to this, Zach. I've never heard of anything like it, and it puts, everybody in such a position, including Saturday. All I'm hearing from folks is around the league is how unfair it is that Saturday gets to skip the line, and that's no reason for Jeff to not accept it. I mean, he can't sit there and go, well, so many other people are deserving. I will not accept your opportunity to become an NFL head coach of the team that I love. So I don't begrudge him from saying yes, but I still don't understand why, other than Irsay was railing against coaching scared and relying on analytics, and here's somebody who's not scared. Is that really all it is? There's nothing else to it? Really? Gut and feel? Zach?
With Jim Irsay, it's hard to find tangible explanations for things, right? I mean, why did they move on from Carson Wentz? They didn't like him.
Well, and to be honest with you, Zach, I mean, that one, I had a front row seat at the combine for that. Everybody was just talking about, That was the worst kept secret when Ballard and Frank Reich was coming to the booth
100%.
talking about Wentz, in a way that he was still present, and they couldn't wait to get rid of him. And that was kind of understandable based on what we saw in Philadelphia and the way that the season ended. And the Ryan acquisition was also understandable. I got that. This one though is totally beyond understanding. I don't get it.
It's beyond bizarre. You're right, because of the options they had. And I'm not saying these are great options, but you've got two former head coaches on staff. John Fox has coached 3 NFL teams, 2 of them to a Super Bowl. Gus Bradley's been a head coach in the NFL. Scotty Montgomery has been a college head coach, and Scott Milanovic has been a CFL head coach for 2 teams. And then you've also got Bubba Ventrone, who's a special teams coordinator, who's starting to get a little interest from a head coaching perspective. So if you're going to go back to that, if you're going to even just go back and try and grab the glory days, which they constantly try to do, Reggie Wayne is on staff as the receivers coach. So this took everybody by surprise. Some of the, just the responses I got from people inside and outside the building yesterday were, what are they doing? Is this for real? This feels like a circus. And just Saturday, he's a great football guy. I get that, but there's a huge, huge, huge step from being a great center in the NFL and even a high school coach to being an NFL head coach in 6 days. This is absolutely unprecedented.
Zak Keefer of The Athletic covering the Colts here on the Rich Eisen Show. It is currently 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on the day after this all went down. It's a Tuesday. There's a game on Sunday in Las Vegas. Who's calling the plays in that game, best you can tell, as we are talking at this very second?
Peyton Manning, Pat McAfee. You got any time Sunday? Who knows? To be completely serious,
yes.
It's probably Scott Milanovic, but this is how bizarre this is. I mean, Jeff Saturday was interviewing members of his own coaching staff last night to find out who would be calling the plays. I mean, that's where they're at. And this is, let me remind you, the worst offense in football, the worst offensive line in football. They didn't, they had the worst day in 25 years Sunday in Foxborough. They had an 0 for 14 day on third down, and they had 120 yards, their worst since 1997. The year before Peyton Manning arrived. So all those things can be true about Jeff Saturday being a great guy, and I bet he gives them some punch, some energy that they need. But they also, they're having this guy walk into a buzzsaw of a team that needs help on offense, and I don't even know what the offensive scheme looks like right now because, frankly, they're running out of people to fire on that side of the ball.
Wow. And so in your article about last night's press conference, and you're going through what's happened in the last several weeks with the Indianapolis Colts, Zak Keefer, you called the Ryan benching, quote unquote, universally unpopular in the locker room. So that was, who ordered the code red? That was Jim Irsay who ordered the code red on Matt Ryan?
Yeah, that was his move.
Okay.
And whether the players say it publicly or not, they were not in favor of that.
So if that's the case, then seeing Sam Ehlinger on the field against Belichick's defense, and just, and I know Irsay spoke last night about history in this century in football and how the Colts are the 4th winningest franchise. If you want to talk history since 2000, Belichick eats quarterbacks like Ehlinger, like a feral prey, right? Like we see animal documentaries that would be the proper analogy of what Belichick does to quarterbacks like that. So why is Frank Reich the fall guy for that after a game like Sunday? Can you help connect those dots for me?
Yeah, that's what I don't like. That's what I have a little bit of hard time understanding, because if the rug was pulled out from under you as a head coach in terms of you don't even get to pick the quarterback. Now, we're not talking just one quarterback here. I would play Nick Foles before I play Sam Ehlinger, but they're not doing that either. As a directive from the owner, they want to play the kid, Sam Ehlinger, and see what he's got. And you pull the rug out from Frank Reich 2 games in. Now, Frank Reich's, he's guilty here too. The offense is terrible. It's his offense. He wasn't getting it done. That's absolutely part of this story, but it just feels like this is an impossible situation for anybody to walk into and have success, because everything goes back to the offensive line falling apart. But if you're telling the coach who to play and who not to play, and then you're firing him for losing with the guy you want him to play, this is meddling. And this is what Jim Irsay has fought for 25 years as an owner. He didn't want to be his father. For those who remember, Bob Irsay was insane. He would run down on the field at halftime and tell the coach to bench the quarterback, and he would fire the coach and forget about it an hour later. And I could go on, but Jim Irsay has been very deliberate. He wasn't going to be that owner. But in the last 12 months, he's stepped into these decisions, and he's made his voice heard. And Frank Reich is out. Marcus Brady is out. And Chris Ballard was sitting there last night sort of like, we had some passionate discussions. I certainly don't believe this was Chris Ballard's choice to go to an unproven coach to try and save a season that's going nowhere.
Of course, since he knows for sure there's nobody on the staff that's called a single NFL offensive play before. Nobody. And you're making this move in the middle of a week. That building must be sleepwalking right now, not knowing what's going on, what the schedule is, how things are going to change, who's calling plays, what's going on at all. And you've got to play a game against Las Vegas. And of all people, the guy who turned down the job.
Right.
You want to talk about football gods winking at you. So, of course, Chris Ballard wouldn't make a decision like this. And that's why I'm still wondering why Irsay did. Did he sit there and think that Reich was coaching scared and going to analytics too much in New England, and that the kid wasn't being supported because he was purposely trying to tank because he was against Ryan being benched? Is that that's the only sort of stuff I would, as you're speculating, because again, as you know, a conspiracy theory always fills the vacuum. So I have no idea. I'm really grasping. Talking.
Yeah, and so are people within the building. People that go to this Colts practice facility every day to work. And some of them are livid, some of them are embarrassed, and some of them are just completely in disbelief. And, one of the most poignant moments last night during this 35-minute bizarro press conference was I asked Jeff Saturday, what in the world are you doing here, for lack of a better phrase? And he said, look, man, I got a call Sunday night, and I was shocked was an understatement. Saturday's response when Jim Irsay brought this up to him was, honestly, can you tell me why you're calling me for this job right now? Right? With all due respect to Jeff Saturday, great player. This is not how this happens in the NFL. And hey, extra credit for thinking outside the box, but this is going to be a long couple of months in Indianapolis.
So let's just try and what's the silver lining? Look for it for me and for Colts fans who might be hearing this, slapping their heads with their open palm. Is there one? You got one here?
They have the worst offensive line in football. Maybe he fixes it. What's happened to Quentin Nelson? What's happened to Ryan Kelly? What's happened to Braden Smith? They allowed 9 sacks on Sunday. 9. That's just horrendous. And they had, I think, 2 net yards in the first quarter. Maybe he gives them some juice. Maybe he fixes the offensive line. And maybe he stays on. They tried to hire him before as an offensive line coach. It didn't happen. But I think this is a test run for Jeff Saturday as well. I think he wants to find out if he wants to be a full-time coach, if he wants to be a head coach or a position coach or something. This is a heck of a way to do it, right? Just get thrown in the fire on November 8th and have a game in Las Vegas in 5 days.
And what about Jonathan Taylor? What can you tell me, Zach, about him and his health?
Do we see him again this season?
Really?
I don't know.
Come on, really? They just put him away? That's the problem, too, is that, the 3 wins that they have already are too many. How about that? Frank Reich won too many times at this point in time.
Yeah, Matt Ryan won too many fourth-quarter comebacks for him. They're not in the top 5 right now, and I think that's the only silver lining at the end of this season. The end of this disaster that has been this season is they need to find a way. They need to find a way into the top 5 or 6 or 7 of the draft, and they need to find a new quarterback. That could be the only payoff from this crazy couple of months that we've had in Indianapolis. Are they really going to it's hard to see the Colts competing in so many of these games down the stretch because of their offense and because so many holes they have to fill right now. And this is a mess of their own making. That's really how I would sum it up.
Zach, appreciate your time again. Let's chat again soon. Just check back in on how it's all working. Thank you, sir.
That was fun. Thanks, Rich.
Right back at you. At Zak Keefer. I follow him. You follow him as well. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.